All right, and welcome back for another episode of AHC Garage. If I'm on here and you're not seeing TJ's pretty face, it's probably because we're working on an NSX, a real car. Not none of those new things, but a car with a little bit of class. And that would be this beautiful 91 NSX. I say 91, you look at the front end, you say, nah, it's an 02. It's a very well done front end conversion on this car. Pretty awesome, but this car's in for some maintenance. Funny story with this car is it was owned by a good friend of ours. That good friend of ours said, I don't want it anymore. Another friend of his said, I want it, sold his NSX and bought this one from him. So the car stays in the family. But the other funny thing is all the problems we just finished fixing on his other NSX, this car has, such as the brakes are not working properly, the AC is not cooling, and the timing belt needs to be done. So that's what we're going to be conquering on this series. But there's a couple little things that are different because you guys have probably seen some of these same things tackled already. When we get to that point, I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so we're going to show you a little bit about this car and some of the neat things about it. First off, we're going to start up here in the front end, and you can see the 02 conversion into the pop-up headlight frame car. There are some modifications that are needed to get it to fit, but it is pretty much bolt in place. And you can see the NSXR style hood with the duct. This is a functional duct. The NSXR has this in order to improve the cooling on the car by directing the air through the radiator and up, out, and over the car instead of into the engine bay where your spare tire would be. So this improves the cooling under pretty heavy driving. Pretty awesome setup. Now moving over here, you can see that it's got some pretty nice wheels on here as the Mugen MF10s. They have been redone because in the back, they've been rebarreled to be double staggered. So that's a custom thing that he had done to a set of MF10s and then powder coated this finish. Also, it's got some really nice Stop Tech brakes, front and rear, two-piece rotors. You can see there's an OE style carbon fiber side mirrors, O2 style side skirts and fillers on the side, door cards, some GT carbon scoops, Root KS, I don't know what they call it, but this is from Root KS. It's like a spat, if you will. Back here, it gets even better. We have the O2 taillights, this carbon fiber diffuser, and also the center exit exhaust. And you can also see here, this is probably my favorite part, backyard special carbon fiber wing. It's very classy, if you will. And then coming up to the engine bay, this is the little extra that we got here. It's got an SOS supercharger on it, Ken Bell supercharger, and doing a timing belt on this is dramatically more interesting than the regular ones that you've seen us do over the years. You can see the alternator's flipped from where it would normally sit here, and there's a whole pulley system that we're going to have to remove to get to the timing belt. That's all behind that stuff. So this is like doing a timing belt but on hard on a car that's already difficult to do a timing belt, but that's what we're going to do on this one. So on top of that, it's got NSXR mesh engine cover and a carbon scoop here, but let's go on the inside because that's pretty as well. All right, so coming on to the inside, the first thing you see, it's got some really beautiful carbon Kevlar Bride Lomax reclinable buckets with some Takata harnesses on here. These don't have the recall on them. These are made for racing. But another thing that lets you know it's a 91 is this armrest. Only the, I think 91 and 92s have that on it, and it's a one-piece armrest, not split. NSXR shift boot, a nice, I believe that's NSXR steering wheel as well. And the car has only got how many miles on it? I think 67,000 miles. Not bad for a 91. Straight down to the red pile carpet here. And, you know, pretty clean, pretty simple setup on it. But this car is a blast to drive with that supercharger on it, giving it in the mid 300s. And it was tuned on E85, and I believe it's back on 93, so that it's a little easier to start. One of the few other things that I didn't mention before that this car is having issue with is the fuel pump was upgraded, but that's causing an issue with the factory wiring. Well, Science Speed's got a solution for that, and that's a fuel pump wiring upgrade kit. And we're going to be installing that on this too. That's behind all the seats and interior pieces back there. So let's get this car up. Let's start getting this timing belt done. I think that's the first place we got to start. All right, so we're underneath the car, and you know what, I forgot to mention, there's some really cool stuff under here. Starting with the Love Fab from Cody Loveland. He made these headers. I don't even think he makes anything like this anymore. It has Cedar Ridge toe arms. It has the Cedar Ridge non-compliance and camber correction bolts here, or I should say bushings right here. That's an awesome upgrade. What do we have here? KWV3s on the coilovers. We got some axle boot leakage here. A Comtech sway bar. This really interesting exhaust. I don't know. Maybe it's to go with from Love Fab here. But that thing is definitely pretty nice. It's extremely loud. I can promise you that. But this is where we're going to be starting our work. We're going to address some of these oil leaks under here. The timing belt probably only has 500-600 miles on it, but I think it's something like 10 or 11 years since it's been changed. So the new owner wants to go ahead and get that taken care of. So that's where we will start and start getting everything worked out. I also believe we have a leak from the AC on this area right here. I put some dye in there the other day. Saw some green leaking, so that's something we're going to address as well. All right, so in this project, we're going to start with the most difficult thing, and that's going to be the timing belt. We're going to start that first. That being said, it's not like any other timing belt that we have done here. I've done one other timing belt on NSX with a Comtech supercharger. This is SOS. It looks like it's pretty much the same with the bracketry. They flip the alternator. The alternator usually sits about where the supercharger is in this area. You can see it's flipped with all this aluminum brackets. It's got pulleys. It's got belts. It's got some interesting stuff on here. So we're going to try and conquer the hardest part first and then move on to stuff like the brakes, the fuel system, the ride height, and all the other goodies. But for now, we're going to start by disconnecting the battery up front, getting the alternator out of the way, and seeing how the heck we take all this apart, because there's a whole bunch of stuff here. So the only way to get it going is to just dive in head first and figure it out. Another thing I noticed when we were over here, and I said this is a replica hood. Turns out this is a OEM 02 NSXR Honda hood. You can see there's Honda insignia here. So this may be Downforce company who makes a hood and duct, but this is the real deal Honda stuff.
Oh, wow.
See that thing? Shine your light over here. There. That don't look so good. I know you have very thin skin. If it gets too cold for you, you know, close the door. I know it might. It went below 70 degrees in Florida. I know that's a shock for you.
It's pretty cold, John.
It's not that bad, man. Come on. So we got everything taken off that we can do on the top area when it comes to the pulley tensioner system for the supercharger. So now we're going to go ahead and jump down to the bottom, get the crank pulley off, and see what that gives us access to down here in regards to pulling off that tensioner. First thing we want to do Let's get the whole tensioner pulley system off, and then we'll go back up top and take the valve covers off, and then start stripping off all of the plastic covers that contain the timing belt and water pump.
Oh my God, he took out the special tool here.
Yeah, the anger saw ran. Bad mamma jamma right here. This thing doubles the torque of whatever you put on it.
And we got our Milwaukee half-inch impact gun.
You could probably do it with the low torque one with how bad that socket is. That's all I know. Oh yeah.
There you go.
There we go. Beautiful. There we go. Whew.
Wow, it's a 3 pulley or tensioner system.
Yeah.
Plastic one here.
A metal one here, plastic one here, and another metal one. But it looks like this one.
Is it loose? I'm curious.
Let's see. Oh yeah. That's not the right one.
It is loose.
Yeah, it's loose. I think Science of Speed offers replacement pulleys for these three, and we might just go ahead and replace those under just preventative maintenance. We've seen this pulley fail before, and it's dramatic because it gets hot, and since it's plastic, the pulley comes off. So then the problem with this is not only does this drive the supercharger, but it drives your alternator. So we're going to go ahead, and we don't want our good buddy to get stuck anywhere because of a silly old pulley. All right, so we got all the stuff out, the alternator, the pulley tensioning bracket, and it all takes up a lot of space in a place where there's not a lot of space. So now that we have that out the way, the only difference between doing this job now and a regular NSX that's not supercharged is we got this in our way. But the good thing is this shouldn't be too hard of a thing to deal with because it's kind of in the space where we don't work. Just another thing to bust your knuckles on and maybe slap your face on if you're down in there. So the next thing we're going to do is pull the valve cover gaskets off, or valve covers off, and then we can start pulling off the AC belt tensioner and all of the covers. So this is tons of fun. Nice and clean under there too.
How clean is that? You're so right.
It's probably the ethanol, huh?
I mean, the aluminum looked brand new, John. 67,000 miles. That thing looked good.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
But I can see someone didn't put Honda Bond on the edges.
Oh.
You see, like right here?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
one down. So we got the front one off. That was fairly easy. The back one's a little bit more difficult just because it's back underneath here more. We're going to remove this strut bar, but hopefully the supercharger is not going to interfere because in order to get this valve cover in, you have to go, it sits like this. We have to put it in like this and then rotate it. So let's start pulling more bolts and see what kind of trouble it gives us. Guess it worked. Ooh, like a glove. So we pulled the valve covers off and you can see it's pretty clean under here. So someone's definitely loved this car. Normally when I pull the valve covers, this one's got a PCV valve on it. This side here has the vent into the throttle body. This side's usually a lot darker, but this one looks good. It may be because this car was on E85 for quite some time. I believe it's back on 93 again, just because it was very hard to start. Maybe the cold crank wasn't tuned properly. But overall, from the top side, this engine looks very healthy. Now we get to take off all these plastic covers on the side. All right, I'm going to pull this bracket off because it makes it easier to get the covers out. Looks like we might have a little oil leak. We'll have to see if it's a cam seal, crank seal, something like that. It might just be the seal on the oil filter housing, which we're going to replace as well. But in order to get these covers out easily, it's much easier to remove the oil filter housing cooler assembly. Looks like these hoses haven't been changed, so we'll probably order 2 of those and replace them and change all the gaskets on this. So first off, it's going to be this brace off, then the oil filter housing, and then the rest of our covers. Ta-da! So that'll drain the oil. And then we're gonna remove the 2 coolant lines, and then all the coolant's gonna drain out. So when this stops draining the oil, we're gonna grab the coolant bucket so that all the coolant will catch on here. And this will take a little time for it to drain out. And while that's draining, we'll be pulling off these covers over here a little bit more.
That shit though. Oh. That's gonna leak everything out.
That's gonna leak a majority of it out there. There's the lower part is gonna be the piping underneath the car, so that'll stay in there. But this is gonna drain the coolant reservoir and most of what's in the engine. So we'll have to let this go for a little while. So we got the oil filter housing cooler out of the way. That gives us good access to everything on here. So now we're going to start by pulling out all the 10mm bolts around here that hold the covers on, get the covers out of the way. Then we're gonna go ahead and set the engine on TDC number 1. That's top dead center number 1. Then we're going to take the belt off, replace the water pump, and go back the other way. So just, you know, bunch of really tight working in this area, but it'll move along real quick. Now this thing's been on here for a while, so the seal is stuck. Then you can take this down like this. Damn seal.
Last cover.
Yes, sir. So you can see here's all of the timing in its glory. We have 4 cams and a big fat long belt on here. Here's our idler pulley, the main crank pulley. This is our washer to make sure the belt stays on track. Here's our water pump. Water pump on this is pretty big because it's got to circulate water from the back of the car to the front of the car. And you see it's got this big billet wheel, but you can see I can spin this pretty freely. All the slack, there's a lot of slack on these belts. They tend to stretch quite a bit. So we're gonna go ahead and set this thing on TDC number 1. We'll show you how to do that. And then we'll go ahead and start removing the belt and the water pump. We rotated the motor to TDC number 1. You can tell it's there because right on the cams, we have the marking for number 1, and that is lined up with the mark on the other cam. And it's very hard to see on the back cam, but there are 2 corresponding marks as well, but it's almost impossible to see. I usually have to use a mirror to do that. So the other thing I do is I have some 10mm bolts that I modify to work as pins, because on the actual cam here, there's places to accept pins to lock it onto TDC number 1. We have 2 here, and then there's 2 more back here. So now we're locked in, and we can now go ahead and loosen and remove the timing belt. and none of the cams are going to roll over and jump out of timing, and that will allow us to continue to do our swap of the water pump and get all the new stuff on there. There we go. NSX timing belt's no joke. So we have all the bolts out of the water pump, and now we're gonna pry it off and get it to start draining what's left in the block. Shouldn't be too much in there. Yeah, there wasn't much left in there. So you can see this monster water pump. Oops, sorry. So this is the NSX water pump. You can see big billet stainless wheel on it. This thing is pretty substantial. It's got to move a lot of water through the motor, all the way up to the front, through the radiator and back. So always important, you don't want one of these to fail. So we got that out. We're going to clean everything up and go ahead and put the new one in. All right, so here we have our water pump. This is the water pump with the updated kit. The original 91s, 92s, earlier NSXs came with a water pump that didn't have an exposed weep hole. So the weep hole is where the shaft seal will start to leak when it starts to fail. On the original one, it would leak behind the cover, and you couldn't quite tell where the leak was coming from. On the updated pumps, they took the weep hole, this right here, and they extended it to come out past the cover with this hole. So when availability is low on certain parts, you can buy this kit, and if you do have a car that has the original water pumps in it, then you have to get this kit, because they've discontinued the original ones without the weep hole. Some people used to just drill a hole in the original case if they didn't want to do it, but this is actually the same price as the other water pump, but you get a new cover with it too. So this is the one I go with if it's available. So we'll go ahead and get this water pump out and get it installed in the car. Nice, shiny, new, beautiful. You can feel the seal on there is nice and tight. We'll get that all in. We also have some of our other parts here, such as a new tensioner for the timing belt, new belts, new seals. There's a new ignition switch for it. We have a new brake master cylinder, valve cover gaskets, and timing belt. So let's get it back together so we can go rip some boost on this thing. All right, so it's time to put the new timing belt on. I have a little trick to this that some other guys who've been teaching me over the years on how to do the timing belts, and it works out pretty good for me, just because you have 4 cams and you got to keep the tension between the cams and between the heads, and this is the way that he taught me. It's pretty simple, works real good. Other people probably use this on other setups and their NSXs, but for me, this is how I do it. I'll come down, since nothing has moved on the car as far as the timing goes, and I'll take my belt and I'll put it on my cams here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zip tie this belt right here in this place. Then I'm going to zip tie this one in this place, set that tension. Then I'm going to run it down under the water pump and set the tension in between the front head and the back head, and then zip tie it there. Once I do that, I can catch my belt on the crank pulley and then snake it around the tensioner and put it all together. This way has worked really good for me for many years, and getting the timing right. When I first started, I'd be off a tooth somewhere, but ever since doing it this way, this has been very helpful. So we're gonna go ahead and get it done now. There's enough play on these pins in order to take that little bit of slack out, so that's perfect for us there. Just take it, snake it down, and get it up on this back cam. All right, so now we have the belt completely set on TDC. We have all of our slack taken out of everything right where it needs to be. Our new tensioner pulley's in place on its spot. Everything is set up and lined up and ready to go. Now all we have to do is put all of our covers back on. All right, so we got to a point where we're gonna hold off up here. We're waiting on some new pulleys to come in for the supercharger tensioning system. They're not necessarily bad. We did find one that was loose, but we don't wanna have to go back in here and deal with this, and they're relatively cheap, so we ordered some new pulleys from Science of Speed, and they're gonna come in. So in order to keep things moving along, one of the other concerns that we saw when we're here is that the axle boots are a little greasy on here. You can see it right here. The boots are just getting old, starting to make a mess. So we're going to go ahead and pull the axles out and reboot them. Relatively easy process, just a little tricky to get it out and then dirty when it comes to cleaning, but it all works out pretty good. These are pretty interesting since they're like front axles or drive shafts that you would have on a front wheel drive, except the wheel doesn't turn. So it's basically two inner joints, and it moves in and out on both of these when it moves with the suspension. So I'll show you that when we get it out. But like I said, we're going to stop on the timing belt and we're going to jump over to these axles and get everything pulled apart. All right, before we get the axles out, we're going to drain the transmission fluid because we don't want to make a mess here. Good excuse for us to change the fluid anyways.
Very clean.
Yeah. There we go. All right. Oh, yeah. There it goes. This one's out. This one's easy. Good. Awesome. All right, so we got the drive shafts down, and now we're going to reboot them. Here you can see the grease is starting to kick out on it. This is an original boot. You can tell from the clamps on it. This has been rebooted once before. These aren't necessarily bad, but they are dry rotted, and we're going to go ahead and just get ahead of it since we have the car in for service. This way the customer is not going to have to worry about it down the road. So what we're going to do is pull off this end, get the boots off, get some new grease in, and reboot it. These are our boot kits, all available from Honda, and they come with everything you need inside to rebuild your axle. It's actually a pretty nice kit. We have the boot, we have the bands, front and rear, we have new axle grease, new axle nuts, and new clips. So that is the entire kit. That's everything you need to do to replace the boots and the grease inside. That being said, these are not like regular CV joints that turn in the front, so they're more like two inner joints. So you can see the boots are all the same. It's all four boots are the same. You're not going to get clicking out of here. If you don't do this right, you will have vibrations. So we're going to go ahead and knock this out. Watch along and see. good. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put some grease back in this one. There's still some grease left in the old one. The grease isn't necessarily bad. We're not going to go through cleaning it all out and changing it. The idea is that it has sufficient grease to lubricate the bearings and that the grease is not contaminated with water. And it's not milkshake looking, as you can see here, which means our grease is not contaminated. So we got the new boot on. As you can see, we banded the bottom. Now we're going to put, I don't know what they call this thing. It's pretty important because that's what the bearings sit on. So one thing I did do before we took it off is I center punched it to make sure that I reinstalled in the proper orientation. Now I wish I could see where I center punched it. I could see here where I center punched it on the shaft. Let me just try and find my mark on this one. I believe that's it right there. All right, so we'll just line this up. We're right on the mark. Use our brass hammer to reinstall as to not mar up any of the surfaces. Now we're going to put our new retaining clip on. Boom. That's in place. Now we're going to fit the bearings back onto it and slide everything together. There we go. Boom. Beautiful.
Very messy, John.
Yes. Axles are messy, and it is not a clean job. But it's altogether not a very difficult job as long as you don't mess up the procedure. Because if you don't do this right, your car will have a vibration. Ask me how I know, because in one of the videos where I rebuilt my axles, I did not put that, I didn't center punch and mark that 3 little prong piece that carries the bearings, and it has it offset, so my car has a vibration on it. So I'm gonna have to go ahead and rebuild my axles again. So we'll go ahead and put the band on. Put the band on, you run it through 2 times. You have the initial one here. Hold it in place. Run it through here. Pull it nice and tight. There we go. Crank on this. Get it nice and tight. Then we bend it up, and this holds the tension on it. This tool has a cutter. Cuts it off just like that. Now Mike's going to go ahead and fold this up and show you how we lock it into place. And now it's locked in. This one's complete. We're going to go ahead and just clean that up, and then we'll pop it right back in the car. Beautiful work, Mike. Thank you for doing it all.
Taking all the credit. I don't care.
Yes. JC did nothing.
Very skillful, John. Very skillful.
Not many people can turn this lever like I do. Highly talented. At least that's what I tell myself, so I feel better and sleep at night. All right, so we're gonna call this the end of the video right now. We got the timing belt installed minus some other stuff because we're waiting on some special order parts from Science of Speed as far as the pulleys for the supercharger go. We have our axles rebuilt. We're gonna go ahead and slap those in with some new axle seals that are also on their way. Then after that, we're gonna, on our next video, you'll be seeing us repair the brake system on the car, diagnose and repair the fuel pump. This car is having a fuel pump issue. And also we're gonna be repairing the AC system. Make sure that you guys subscribe, like, and tune in for the next episode. And definitely ask some questions. If you see I'm doing something weird, drop a comment. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. We're all learning here. But we like to go ahead and show you what we're doing after hours because we know you guys love it, especially since it's an NSX and it's much nicer than TJ's car because it's classy. Thank you guys.